people, how you doing? So, yes indeed, the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. I had to get it from Dubai because it's not available in India. I didn't actually go there, I got someone to get it for me, but well, it really bothers me that such an incredible flagship with such potential is not even available for purchase in India. Like, it just makes no sense. But anyways, we're gonna jump right in because there's so many things to talk about. Like, bloody hell, there's a lot that this phone can offer. Now, whether or not they're good enough, well, that remains to be seen. So, of course, we're starting off with a difficult one. I mean, these two phones, well, if they can't handle it, no other flagship can. So, yeah, they can't handle the back situation, let's just say that. And another question that arises with the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is, of course, unlike the Xiaomi 13 Pro that I've made countless videos about already, did Xiaomi finally fix the issues that we had with Leica Authentic and Leica Vibrant? Well, this is Leica Vibrant, and I think it's got too much contrast. I really like the balance on the iPhone in this case, but with Leica Authentic, it looks perfect on the Xiaomi. Maybe a pinch desaturated in some of the greens, just a little, as opposed to the iPhone, which looks 100% realistic right here. But yeah, it seems they fixed the issue where the Leica Authentic would completely crush shadows. Here's another shot, a slightly more simple situation to see if that maybe influences something. And with Leica Vibrant, it looks nice. I think this is right here one of the major problems on the iPhone. You can see that the warm tones that are supposed to be there, given the time of day and the kind of colors that we had, it's completely gone on the iPhone as opposed to the Xiaomi, which is retaining a lot of that. But then you go to Leica Authentic, and now, well, as the name indicates, it looks very authentic. Maybe a pinch more magenta in the pavement than what was actually real, but it's way closer to reality than anything the iPhone can produce, and no crushing shadows once again. So suffice to say, Leica Authentic works. Here's another serious issue on the iPhone: you cannot take main camera close-ups. Now that really sucks, because the main cameras on these phones, both of these phones, they're incredible. You can see on the Xiaomi, it looks sublime. What you can do is actually change the aperture on the Xiaomi. This is f1.9, which means a lot of bokeh. But if you really wanted, you could use f4.2. You could switch it manually, which is very important. Being able to switch manually, that's quite a nice customizable option, especially if you are more of a professional photographer. An option like this could be quite something. You see, it just basically expands the focal length, gives more of the shot to be in focus, and it can be quite useful given the situation. As for the ultrawide camera, well, I distinctly remember taking a shot very similar to this last year, and let's just say it did not work out. The entire sky looked white. That's how bad dynamic range used to be. Although in this case, I do think that the shadows are being crushed a little too much on the iPhone, as opposed to the Xiaomi. It's doing a perfect job. It is maintaining a lot of contrast, which I really like, but it's also maintaining just enough shadow detail to not look crushed. Now here's another ultrawide, and I'm not exactly sure what was going on with the weather, but it was very hazy. I mean, you can tell that the sun is out, but there's not exactly a ton of light to go around. But what I do like on the Xiaomi in this case is that it's not only giving us very natural colors, which the iPhone is doing to quite a good extent, but the contrast on the field, like the grass and everything, the textures just pop out with this ultrawide shot. But of course, the one thing that the iPhone irrefutably does better than most flagships, and definitely better than the Xiaomi over here, is macro. Like, bloody hell, look at the sheer level of detail on this shot. Like, it's mind-blowing. I think it looks significantly better than the Xiaomi. The Xiaomi, it never really had particularly good ultrawide macro, and the 13 Pro, it had this feature with the telephoto camera, which allowed us to take macro with that sensor. We don't really have that feature here, so that's a disappointment. But anyways, let's check out zoom. So in this case, I think the Xiaomi, it may be a pinch darker than the iPhone, but as a whole, the color tones and the white balance, it's absolutely perfect. Like, there's no denying that. It is so close to reality, it could be reality itself. Well, you know what I'm talking about. The iPhone, as you would expect with the warm tones, it always is a little funky. It essentially will almost always overcompensate and give you cooler tones. Now then, 2x. This is interesting. Now firstly, I do like the contrast on the iPhone. I also believe that it is overcompensating for the warmth as usual, but the 2x is sensor crop on both, supposedly. So of course, I wanted to see which one had more detail. Cropping in all the way to 500%. And would you look at that? we finally have a match for the tremendous 2x sensor crop on the iPhone. The Xiaomi, it doesn't have as much contrast, so some of the details in the shadows and whatnot, it doesn't really pop out as much, but if you look at the edges, that's where you can really, distinguish between the two, or rather not distinguish, because both of them look incredible and very nicely detailed. It's basically on par. Now 3x, or rather 3.2x, it's actually optical on the Xiaomi, which means more real detail, but the iPhone, it's processing the image basically perfectly. Yes, not exactly right with the colors, because the Xiaomi is rendering the colors right, but the contrast is really not there and it looks really faded and just, it doesn't really work. Even with less detail, I would actually prefer the iPhone in this case. As for 5x, see, 5x is optical in both, so the details are tremendous, but man, I don't know why it looks so weirdly faded on the Xiaomi while the iPhone is doing such a tremendous job with the contrast, like through and through. The iPhone's contrast has been more than impressive. It's been quite something. At 10x, the Xiaomi supposedly again tries to use sensor crop, but I'm not really seeing enough of a difference in detail, and there's also the fact that the contrast is just not there on the Xiaomi. Even with sensor crop's level of detail, I don't think it's really doing much of anything over here. It's just, it doesn't really work out. Now speaking of details, we gotta check out the high res. So the Xiaomi has high res on every single rear camera, which is quite something. But of course, we gotta start with the main camera, and I do like the contrast on the Xiaomi, as you would expect. But then cropping in again, 500%, and there's really no proper difference. At this zoom range, if there's no significant difference, you're gonna get tremendous shots out of both, because I know that the iPhone has incredible detail preservation with high res, and the Xiaomi is matching it. That's a good thing for both, I guess. Now with the ultrawide, the Xiaomi once again comes in with high resolution. But is it actually gonna match up? Because so far, as I've seen, most high-res ultrawides don't actually produce a whole lot of detail in reality. But, well, we finally have an ultrawide high-res that actually works. Because, as you can see, definitively more detail than the iPhone. With high resolution, you can get more detail, which is a pretty big deal. Now the 3.2x telephoto also has high res. It's not really much of a comparison between the iPhone and the Xiaomi, because the iPhone doesn't even have any close range zoom options like these. So anyways, zooming in to 500%, and I mean, you can tell, of course there's more detail on the Xiaomi, but there is also this weird artifacting around the edges that I'm not really sure why it exists, but it is a little distracting. I mean, it's 500% crop, but still. And then finally, 5x with the high res. Lots of options, as I said. But when we zoom in, actually, it's a little interesting. So at 500%, I do think that the Xiaomi is cleaner and it has a little bit more detail, especially around the areas where it's not blurry. But the blur is the problem, because there was like a small little breeze at best. But somehow there's a whole bunch of motion blur happening on the Xiaomi. I don't exactly understand why that's the case. But yeah, definitely an interesting find. But then, the front camera. Oh, how the turntables have turned. Wow, I don't even need to say that I prefer the iPhone. I mean, come on, look at it. The Xiaomi is not bad, in this case at least. But the iPhone is just exquisite. I mean, I expected the iPhone to be incredible no matter what, because it really does handle human subjects better than almost any other smartphone out there. And I mean, the Xiaomi is not exactly trying to compete in that regard, that's for damn sure, at least when it comes to the selfies, because yeah, I'm never gonna pick a selfie like that, as overexposed as it is on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. It just really doesn't work for me now, does it? Even in a backlit shot like this, I mean, you can tell that, yeah, the dynamic range is alright on both, it looks good, but man, the contrast is so much better on the iPhone. The balance and contrast that the iPhone can have, it can be worthy of a chef's kiss very easily. As for portrait selfies, well, I'd expected things to maybe get a little bit better, but it actually got a little worse because the overexposing problem is still there. But the sky is blown out in the background, which means dynamic range isn't as good either, which is concerning at this point. Now this kind of a backlit selfie, well, I guess it's fairly backlit if you really want to think about it, but yeah, the iPhone just pulls ahead, man. It's way too good with the selfies and selfie portraits right there. Like, there's really not much of competition right there. Now this one, final nail in the coffin for the Xiaomi's front camera. Definitely, I think this is like the weakest part of the Xiaomi's camera system as a whole. Like, it has a lot of good things. The front camera, it's not really one of them. Unfortunate for some people who might be really looking forward to good selfies, but I don't think anyone who wants to buy the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, or if you can buy the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, that's also something, well, you're probably not all that interested in selfies, I'm guessing. Now, night selfies, don't take them on either, because they're not good. The Xiaomi just, it doesn't really brighten things up properly. It doesn't work as well. The iPhone, yeah, this thing is insanity given birth, because it uses the front-facing flash for night mode. You cannot turn it off, which bothers me so much. Like, what's the point of night mode if I'm gonna use the bloody flash? Like, it makes me look retarded. Anywho, moving on to rear camera portraits, and this is where the Xiaomi once again bucks up, because it's producing a really nice result here. Now, we can actually use like a vibrant or authentic depending on your tastes, and I think that the iPhone looks perfect in this case. Just saying, you probably can't get any better with the skin tones and contrast. Now, like authentic, if you do opt for that, will give you more contrast. As you can see, it's basically similar levels of contrast as the iPhone, but I do think it's desaturating the skin tones a little too much, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Now, on the Xiaomi, we have something called a master lens system. Now, this right here is a 35mm shot. Essentially, it crops in a little bit from the main camera to give you slightly better composition. Now, I think the iPhone still looks better. It has better contrast, better skin tones, and I think similar to the selfies, the Xiaomi is kind of overexposing over here. Now, this is 50mm. It's supposed to be somewhere around the 2x sort of range, so technically both of them are supposed to be using 2x sensor crop. The iPhone, of course, looks exceptional, like the level of detail, the contrast, the skin, everything. I'm telling you, man, for human subjects, there's probably not a better device at the moment available. Now, 75mm, this is around 3x. So the Xiaomi, I'm presuming, is using the 3x telephoto. And it looks very nice and detailed. I really like the higher contrast. It's close to the iPhone, but the sheer level of detail on the iPhone is way higher. And I also kind of prefer the skin tones on the iPhone a little bit more. Now, you can also use 90mm, which will give you this, like a dreamlike soft effect, and it doesn't work for me, not by a long shot. I don't really want anything to do with this kind of a portrait, but if you want it, it's there. Now, of course, it's my comparison. There has to be backlit portraits, right? And there are. As you can see, I think both are doing a pretty good job. I do believe that the iPhone is maybe a little too dark, while the Xiaomi is maybe a little too bright. Something in between would probably be absolutely perfect. But, well, that's really not the case. However, I think the iPhone is pulling ahead, because if you look closely at the background, you can see that the Xiaomi is kind of messing up the background blur, like it's not blurring some of the parts properly. Now, for backlit with the telephoto, yeah, it just doesn't work for me, because the Xiaomi looks so bland. It's not just faded, it's bland. It's like, I don't know, uncooked bread. I don't really think I need to say anything more, because the images, they speak for themselves. Now, night portraits. I get it, this was fairly dark. You can see that the iPhone, which has night portraits, even that is struggling a little with like my t-shirt and all that, but, well, I can tell you this much. It's better than the Xiaomi, because the Xiaomi doesn't even have the feature. It's a little disappointing, mainly because I would expect an ultra device from a company like Xiaomi that likes to give us a whole bunch of features to have night portraits, but unfortunately they don't. Now, for regular night mode shots, well, you can use like a vibrant or like a authentic depending on your tastes. I do think that in this case, given the lighting situation, the Xiaomi is kind of overdoing the warmth a little too much, while the iPhone, it's completely removing it, which I don't like at all. But then thankfully on the Xiaomi, if you do switch to like authentic, it really gives you a much better image, especially when you're taking shots at night. It'll give you darker skies, slightly darker shadows, and it doesn't seem to be overdoing the warmth as much. It is still a little too reddish. Yeah, that's still a problem, but I still think as a whole it looks better than what we're getting from the iPhone. Now this is a very difficult shot, and I think both phones are technically nailing it, because it looks incredible on both, but I think the Xiaomi is one step ahead. Like the iPhone, the fact that it is beating out the iPhone, by even a few small things like the detail on the wall, the color of the light, the way it's handling the light on the plants, like right at the bottom, all that stuff, along with less lens flares, of course. Yeah, those things, they really add up to have me prefer the Xiaomi in this case. Now for the ultrawide camera, with Leica Authentic as usual, I think some might believe that the Xiaomi is kind of underexposing the shadows, understandably, but I do gotta point out, it was very dark, and the way Leica Authentic works is that it'll essentially maintain the same level of exposure as you have in your surroundings. It won't lift it up even a little bit. The iPhone is lifting it up just a pinch. So that's just something to keep in mind, because if your scene is a little bit brighter, like in this case, it will produce a slightly brighter shot. But I gotta point out, the Xiaomi is just completely screwing up the white balance. It is horrible. The warmth is so wacky, it looks completely weird yellow, like some kind of nuke exploded somewhere. The iPhone, on the other hand, somehow, by some miracle, it manages to produce a perfect shot. There's no problems here. The warmth is perfect. The sky on both, they look just delicious. Delicious? Does that work? I don't know. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. And the weird thing about the previous image is that the Xiaomi manages to produce a much better, much more perfectly balanced shot in a more difficult situation like this, as opposed to the previous one where it completely screwed up the white balance and the warmth. So that's odd. But regardless, I do think that this is an impressive example of just how good night mode can be on both, because it is a hell of a difficult shot and both of them are bloody nailing it. Now for zoom at night, see, this is going to be interesting. So 2x sensor crop is supposed to be used when you're taking 2x shots at night. But I don't think either of these phones are doing that, because this looks like digital zoom to me. That's for good reason. If you want to use sensor crop, you're gonna end up with problems with the exposure and the light gathering capacity of the sensor. And so with that thrown out the window, all you have is digital zoom. But this is also the point where having a good telephoto camera like we do on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, it really comes in handy, because good hardware is good hardware. The software can fail, the hardware usually doesn't. As you can see in this case, it's a significantly better shot than obviously anything the iPhone can produce. It doesn't really have telephoto cameras at this zoom range. And I mean, it's a really good and really crisp shot on the Xiaomi here. At 5x, I mean, obviously both phones have incredible hardware for this, and the shots just look really nice. No question about it. I do prefer the colors on the Xiaomi a little bit more. Slightly better preserved warmth. Once again, just that one little complaint I've been carrying over throughout this entire comparison. At 10x, I know most people won't take this, but it gives me a good idea of the limits. So at 10x, I think somehow the iPhone managed to produce perfect white balance. The warm lights in the background, they look very accurate. But it also has way more noise. Also a little bit more sharpness. The Xiaomi, on the other hand, it handles the noise perfectly, but it's lacking a little bit in the details, and the lights in the background, they look off. So that's the end of the comparison, and man, I'm pretty sure that went long. Regardless, I do think that the Xiaomi 13 Ultra has had a multitude of improvements. Like it seems to have worked out really well. The fact that Leica Authentic can be used properly now, that's a big deal for me, because it means we can get high contrast, natural looking shots as opposed to being forced to use vibrant. The problem, of course, lies in human subjects. Selfies in particular, like the selfies were just... they were problematic, to say the least. And it's something that Xiaomi really just needs to work on. There's no two ways about that. But otherwise, if you're willing to ignore the selfies, which, for someone like me, I don't care about selfies. I never take selfies outside of comparisons. So for me, it doesn't even matter. And if you're like me, oh yes, you're gonna love this phone. The Xiaomi 13 Ultra is quite something. If only it was bloody available all around the world properly, like, god damn it. Anyways, I'll be seeing you guys soon with many more to come. Cheers.